Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the show. Fernando.
Welcome to the show.
So this is, of course, COVID time. 'Tis the season to be COVID. We have to clean all the cars out, Lysol, wipe them all down, get them all cleaned out. But that's not the point of the show. It's a Mustang. I know. It's like Ford F-150, and then like Mustangs a lot lately. I apologize. It's just what happens, what's interesting. But this one, as you Mustang guys know, this one's special. We get a lot of questions about this car. It's just easier to film a video. What makes this Mustang special? Well, it has the Mach stereo in it. Let's take a look at it. So this car has already been worked on. He put a radio in it already. He's not happy with it. He likes buttons. This has no buttons. He did use the new Metra kit. So if you have one of these that has like the top screen and the inset screen down below, Metra is now making a kit for this car. As you can see, it looks rather nice. We've put them in before. Contains all your buttons. The radio powers these. In some cases. In some cases, there's another amplifier that's buried down here, and it powers these as well. These are little 2.5-inch mid-range. We'll take a look at those later once we get them apart, and we're gonna put some tweeters up there. Then you have 4 5x7s, one here, and 2 back there. That hump, that's another 2.5-inch. There's one located here, and one located here. There's 4 5x7s and 4 little 2.5, 3-inch thing. The things are where the balance and fader happen. Fade left, fade right, and all of those corners of the car. Those are what are moving. The 5x7s are not. Those are all mono, and they're powered off of 2 amplifiers that are located here and here in the trunk. This big plastic piece of stuff here, this has to come out. There's actually a 5x7 mount located here and here that we're gonna use to put our new speakers in. There's a giant umbilical cord that's attached to this. It all just unclips and comes out, but you do have to get the rear deck out first. The 3.5 thingies are located in this. We're not going to be using those in the rear because there's no purpose to. We're going to go with a coaxial that has a tweeter mounted in the center of it. Ideally, what we're doing is we're taking all this out and making it the base model stereo. But what that allows us to do is get some trunk space so that we can put an actual decent sized woofer in here, because this thing hangs down like 5 inches. It's a total waste. We're going to be putting a big 7. I think we're going to be putting a Rockford P3. Anyway, we'll see that in a minute. Let's take a look at the other equipment we're going to be putting in this car today. For radio, he's getting the brand new Kenwood Exelon DMX 957 XR CD DVD list, or Mecha list as I like to say. This is the premium. This is the XR, which means it has all the audio grade components. It has the better screen. It's a phenomenal player. It's definitely going to be an upgrade from the radio he has in there. And the one thing that he is most concerned with is it has buttons. He wants a hard volume button. He doesn't want to touch the screen. Next, for an amplifier, we're going to be doing the XR90 1.5. We need something small and compact, mainly because there's just not a lot of extra room in the car to put amplifiers and such, and he still wants some trunk. He does some traveling in this, yeah, I know, and he wants to be able to still fit some luggage in the back. This is a small size amplifier with a ton of power. Also to think about is they're also both high-res compatible, so that's kind of nice. We're also going to be doing an EchoMaster LFDPL in black backup camera. This has the faux dynamic lines that uses some centripetal force, so as you turn, it turns. For the rear, we're going to be using the Focal Universal ICU 570 coaxial 5x7 speakers. And for the front, we'll be using the ISU 5x7 component speakers. This tweeter is going to go up in that little thingy pod. And then for odds and ends, he's going to get some roadkill sound treatment, some fast rings, some Stinger 4000 series RCAs, and of course a Stinger fuse holder for underneath the hood, and Stinger power wire. That's what we're putting in this. But one thing that's fun about this car is he's restoring it. So he's starting to build it back to its former glory. It has a huge motor in it. He's doing a lot of work to it. One of the pieces in this car that is always just broken, and there's reason for it, is the door handle. As you can see, these doors, they've seen better days. They're not full plastic. This clip always breaks. It's held in place by this little spot here, which is that. Those typically break off. It's just not a fun piece. Now, these are new, and they still don't fit perfect, mainly because the door panel itself is starting to warp and, you know, fall apart. I don't think Ford thought people would be driving these that long. I mean, it's a Mustang. It's not like people keep those things for a long period of time or anything, right? Yeah, it was a joke. And we're gonna let him take this door panel off, and then we'll come back to it and we'll talk a little bit more about the wiring inside of it. This is the wiring here and here. This one is obviously for the 5x7. This is obviously for the little mock speaker pod. These are the wires that are going behind the deck. These are the wires we're going to be using. This is a mono wire, meaning that this is also connected to the 5x7, either located in that door or in the rear deck back here. We don't want to use those. If we were doing something like a full active stereo, then we would grab those wires in the kick panel because we don't need them connected to all their other stuff. For this purpose, because we're doing a smaller system, we're going to be using the passive crossovers that are built into those speakers. We want to use this. This is where a lot of people get confused. This is where a lot of people, like, they'll buy 5x7s and they'll use that wiring and then they'll be like, I don't get any tweeter sound. I put coaxials there and they don't make any noise. Why?
That's horrible.
It does. That's because they're still using those amplifiers. A simple solution, if you're going to be upgrading this, just putting a new radio in and let's say a new set of speakers in the doors, is connect them to those wires like we're going to be doing. If you have a convertible, it's the exact same way. In the rear deck, once we get that out, it has the same style connectors where it has two wires that are going up to the radio and then the rest of the wires are connected to those amplifiers. We'll be using those same two wires back there. That's one of the big secrets about this car that people just I don't get. On the amplified version of this, if you happen to have one of those, that little amplifier that's mounted in there, it works the exact same way. Those 4 speaker wires for the smaller pods are located in that. There is a harness that you can plug in, both Metro and Pack make it. It's an amp bypass harness for a Ford that plugs in. You'll get your 8 wires there that you can connect to the radio that you're putting in, power everything back up, and you're golden. A simple upgrade for this car would be to put in a new radio, a set of components like we're doing here, a new set of coaxials in the rear, use those 8 existing speaker wires, connect them up to your new radio, and you're rocking and rolling and everybody's happy. We're going a little bit more than that, but just so you understand how the basic system works. As much as I don't want to, I'm going to be hopping into the back of the car now, taking the back deck out. Pack a lunch. The first thing you need to do to get to your speakers is remove the back bottom seat. Don't pull on it. There's little tiny clips, it just unclips. They're right in the center. Reach in and you push here and it'll pop right out. Every Mustang has some form of this, whether it be on the seat or here. Never just yank on a Mustang. You'll break the seat. When removing the back of the Mustang, it really starts on the running boards. You start at the running boards. That allows you to get these side panels out. You have to pull this whole back seat area out. And eventually what happens is this piece comes out. If you're trying to get the whole back of the car out like we are because we have a bunch of wires to run. Otherwise, you can fold the seats down, remove this piece here, and this is carpeted, just a cardboard. You can kind of push up from the middle and turn sideways, and then just the back piece will come out. Fortunately, we got to pull the whole thing. Be super careful with this piece of the car. More than likely, it's going to be broken. These always snap off. back of the car all apart, that gets us access for running our wires as well as getting to this rear deck here. Let's take a closer look at that rear deck. Here is your little 2.5 thingy speaker, your 5x7 subwoofer, and then the matching set on that side. All these screws here just need to come out, and then the whole thing drops down and you can unplug it. It is kind of heavy and it is going to drop down. There's about a dozen little clips and plugs that you want to remove. They all will come off of this umbilical here. Two that stay are these. These are the ones that run up to the radio in the front. These are the ones we're going to reuse. If you have a base model car, they're still there. These are the same wiring. They just add this for the mock stereo. This giant thing gets to come out. There's one mono amp and there's the second mono amp. It's heavy. It's definitely heavy. It's a solid piece of plastic, which probably is why you get such good bass response out of these 5x7 inch subwoofers. It's the same thing that's in the front door, same thing that's in the front door there. And yeah, that's it. The first step I need to do is get the radio out of the dash real quick and see what's behind there to make sure that little amplifier isn't there. To get this radio out, pull out the gear shifter, reach underneath, take a small panel tool, gently pry this loose, unplug all your switches from down below. There's 2 screws here holding the radio in place, but really what I need to see is if there's an amplifier in here, and there isn't. That's great. We don't get it. The radio's out, there's no amplifier located behind it. This one is a newer model, which we can tell from the plug that they're using from the factory. The speaker wires, like we were saying at the beginning, these are going to the little thingy mock speaker pods, and this is feeding the mono amplifiers in the trunk. We won't be using this anymore, but we will be using this. Fernando starts getting the roadkill treatment on the front doors to dampen those up. I also need to make the tweeter pods so that we can put our new tweeters in those locations. This is the little sail panel pod. We need to get this speaker out. 2 Torx screws. And this is what we're trying to get to. We need to make a panel that'll take it from this speaker Focal tweeter does come out of this. If you want to get down to the actual raw tweeter, you can. This is a metal, so don't touch it, and make sure there's no screws around if you do take the top off, because they will stick right to it and destroy the cone of the speaker. I strongly recommend leaving it in the case until it is time to go into the car if you are going to be removing it. It does have little teeth on here that you line the tweeter up with and then twist. Inside the box, it does come with 2 angle mounts, whole bunch of screws, and these guys. These are the crossovers for both of the sets of speakers. This small set here is for the tweeters. This bigger set here is for the mid-range. Instead of coming with a big passive crossover or even a small passive crossover, they've broken them out into their individual pieces. It makes installation easier. Why this is helpful? In this case, both speakers are located on the door, so that's easy. But if you had a tweeter on, let's say, the A-pillar inside of the car in the door, and you had a big passive crossover, you have to figure out some way to wire that up so that you'll get to both of those. That usually involves running new wiring of some kind. When you go with something like this, it has all that built into it. Since we're at this point, let's take a look at the mid-range that we're going to be using. This is the factory 5x7 inch woofer. You notice it has a bigger magnet than what you're probably used to seeing from a factory speaker. It's actually got a lot of extra work that has gone into it. Ford doesn't make speakers like this anymore, for sure. This was definitely something that, well, it's kind of an anomaly. Definitely impressive. If you've ever heard one of these with those 4 5x7s, you got a decent amount of bass out of it. What we'll be replacing it with is this Focal here. Comes with a cover over it so you don't do any damage until you're ready to put it in. It has a treated cloth cone, butyl rubber surround, mica dust cap, flip it over, you have a vented pole piece. These little rubber pieces here that say Focal, those are part of the dampening for this metal. They're there to absorb some of the vibration you might get in the basket. When you compare the magnets, our new magnet is still bigger than this factory subwoofer. These are their factory upgrade. If you're looking to put this in off of deck power, you can do that. If you're looking to amplify them, you can do that. It doesn't take a lot of power to get these things to get up and dance. So you don't need a 120 watt amp or a 200 watt amp. You're fine with something between, let's say, 35 to 100 watts of power, as well as you can go down to that 18 watts from your radio and still get good sound out of these. Obviously, the more power you get them, the better they will sound. To design this, there's 2 ways we could do it, depending on what kind of tools you have around. The first way you could make a mount for this is to get something like some blown PVC, some ABS, screw your speaker into place. Sometimes the nubs will stick up here. Sand them down. Head over to your router. This is a double bearing spiral cut flush trim that we get from Mobile Solutions. Adjust your height. You want the bearings to ride on the side of the speaker here. And you'll end up with an exact copy of the speaker. Your screw holes are already there because you use those to screw in the speaker to the plastic. All you really need to do is typically drill them out a little bit bigger, and then you have to cut your tweeter size out. That can be done by picking up the Mobile Solutions Smart Circle System. This has a ton of different size holes for making tweeter cutouts, and you're essentially going to do the same thing. You're going to figure out which hole you need, tape this here using your template tape that you can get from Mobile Solutions, and you're golden. You'll have an exact copy of this speaker that you can then make another copy of and put on the other side. And if you only have 2 to do, or you have limited tools, that's a great way to do it. We've done it like that for years. However, we have the Glowforge laser.
We have the third guy.
What that means is we're gonna scan this speaker in and do it that way. From now on, if we need to do this, all I have to do is hit print, it'll cut them out. Makes things a tad bit easier. Granted, there is a little bit more upfront time because I have to design the speaker into the software so that we can print it. The first step is putting it on a flatbed scanner so that we can scan this shape into our computer. On an Apple computer, they have a factory program called Image Capture. That application is designed to be used with anything that has image capability such as a scanner or a camera. That way you don't have to download any weird software. You can select the area around the image you're trying to scan so you don't end up with a huge file. Launch the Amidine design software. Drop our shape into the middle of the page. Name your layer so you can keep track of everything. I create a new layer. I call that outline. What we need to do first is find the size of this so that we can design our speaker in the right proportions. To do that, we'll measure this circle here in the center. We're also done with the flatbed scanner, so we can put this away. With our calipers zeroed out, we have a 2.7 inch circle. Coming back over to the computer, grab our circle template, hold down the shift key and draw a circle. Turn on the stroke, undo the fill, come up to the top, make sure that the joined icon is on, then type in the right size. 2.724. Select our move tool, click on it. Since the scan is black, make this easy to see. I'm gonna pick orange, move this into place, drag and drop this until we get it to be the right size. We're almost there. That looks about correct. Next, we'll grab our square with rounded corners. Turn off the fill. We'll cut off the portion of this that we don't need. And after some fine tweaking and adjusting, we end up with the shape that we're looking for. Lastly, we need to drop in the circles for the holes. Coming back over to the speaker, we can measure the size that they are. Move those into place. Command C and V gets us a copy of that. And this gives us the basic shape that we're going for. This would be what we just routed out. We have to add in the center for the tweeter. To do that, we're gonna create another circle that was the same size as this. Select a new layer, call it tweeter hole. Change the color. I make all the paths that I'm going to be turning off before print. I like to make them out of blue. The reason why we're doing this, we want to add some crosshairs. This will give us our center. Grab our new Focal tweeter, measure how big we need it to be. We can repurpose our path circle here because we have it centered. If we just change our measurements, we'll go directly into the center of where it was. Change our color from blue to orange so we know not to delete it. And there we go. We now have a version of the speaker that we can cut out on the laser. At this point, if you want to add any logos or anything like that to this, you can. Check the scale. Not much room in the way that we can add a logo. Granted, the laser can go super small. This does say Focal on it. However, we could put a little tiny 5-star logo there if we wanted. Create a new layer and call it logo. The reason why you want to do that is because sometimes when you drop artwork onto the application, it bogs the whole thing down. Sometimes if you add it in too quick, it's easier just to figure out where it goes, turn it off, finish your drawing, and then turn it back on. And that's it. We can export it out now and get it over to the laser. Let's take a look and see how she fits. With the Focal tweeters, they don't give you any mounting options for the backside or bracing. It just has these little teeth on it here, which as you can hear as I'm pushing this off are snapping into place, which is what we wanted. We can turn it to get it into the right viewing. We made this out of 1/8 inch so that it closely represents factory. Our screw holes line up. This guy's done. We can get him mounted into place and I can get him off to Fernando. This is what it looks like. Definitely a lot sexier than this old beat up speaker in there, and it's gonna sound way better too. With the rear deck all out and ready to go, that was my part for this. Fernando is gonna hop in there and do the roadkill. I need to check and find a location for the amplifier so that we can get started on that. With that rear deck out, we can take a look at what's going in there to replace it. The vocals come with a bag of screws, an instruction manual. This instruction manual covers the whole integration series. If you open it up, there is a sticker inside. It's like a box of cereal. This speaker is an exact copy of the front speaker. Uses the same front speaker, same butyl surround, same cone material, same tweeter. Basket is the exact same with the absorption panels here, same size magnet. It is the same speaker as the front. The only difference is this tweeter is mounted in the center. Unless you absolutely had to have a tweeter mounted 3 inches away in the rear deck, there'd be no reason not to use these for this job. Focal does also give you a gasket. We had these on the fronts, I just didn't show them to you. Take a closer look at the X901.5 high-res audio amplifier. Inside the box you get some screws, some Allen keys, and the screws for the bass knob, so don't lose the instruction manual. Little area over here has the bass knob and the extension. Now this bass knob is made to be mounted behind something. It's made to come up from the back side. It really doesn't have any other provisions for it, so keep that in mind when you get this, that it needs to be back mounted somehow. The Allen keys it gives you are to take off the top piece here, which is a little beauty panel that's just to cover the screw holes. These screws don't stay in anything. Best practice is to screw them back into the amplifier until you're done and need them again. These Allens are extra long because they have to get deep down inside of the amplifier, because as you can see they're about halfway down in the middle of the amplifier. It does have 340 amp fuses on it. You have 6 channels of input, front speaker A, rear speaker B, subwoofer located on the very end along with your power ground and remote. On the opposite end is where your sub is going to plug in. First, your input sensitivity, so you have volume control for channel A, B, and sub. Subwoofer bass boost, subwoofer crossover, then your A front high crossover, your rear B crossover. All of them are variable between 50 to 200. You can turn both front and rear crossovers on and off. They can only be high pass. The subwoofer does not have an on and off switch. It is always on. Your bass boost is between 0 and 18 dBs. Your gain control is between 5 volts to 0.2 volts. It does also have a fan. If you are going to put anything over this, make sure you leave room for the fan. It's a pretty solid amplifier for its size. It feels like if you chuck this at somebody, it's definitely going to hurt them. It has good weight to it. I put all my pieces back into the box so I know where they're at if I need them later. I need to get this over to the car and see if we can find some place to put this up and out of the way. Changing plans as far as the subwoofer goes. We're still going to go with the Rockford. We were originally going to do the factory box. I had said P3. It's actually going to be a P2. Factory box is like 15 inches tall, which is ridiculous. It won't even come close to fitting through here. We have about 13.5 inches here, and then even if you come in from the back side, you have that same 13.5 inches. So we found an A-trend box that we carry. It's a little bit deeper, narrower, but it's shorter this way. It's the same amount of airspace, and it fits, which is a bonus. The amplifier, we need to find some place to put that. The original thought was to go somewhere up here, and I think that is actually going to happen. If I make a panel that comes off of this piece here and goes to this piece and comes down roughly, I don't even think, maybe 1/4 of an inch, possibly a half, I can fit the amplifier above the subwoofer enclosure just like this. And if I make it right, I can get all my controls in from right here and then attach it into this tray, which I'm pretty excited about because that's one thing we thought about and it's actually going to work. A lot of these installs are phone conversations we have where people drive in and come up with ideas like the factory box going in, and sometimes it just doesn't work out, so you need a plan B and sometimes a plan C. Like I said, he wants to keep a lot of this trunk space accessible, and I think this will do it. Plus it'll keep it out of this trunk area here. Mustangs typically like to leak as they get older because of these pieces here. They get caught, as you can see, in this rubber boot, and water starts to come in through here. If you own a Mustang, this is the bane of your existence as far as what happens in the trunk of your car. This is where your leak is coming from. If we go up top here, we're not going to have that problem. After doing some measurements, figuring out how I'm going to make this panel, I need a panel that is 18.5 inches by 13 inches wide. From that, I'm going to add a couple bends to give me the drop down that I need to make the panel. Let's head over to the saw. Cut it to size and then scored where our first 2 bends have to be. I want to just get these two done and make sure we're on the right path. To heat up and bend the ABS, we use the Power Pro butane torch. Does a spectacular job. Fernando has the sound treatment all in place, looking good. The speakers are mounted. We decided we're not going to use the factory speaker wires for the rear speakers because we're going to be mounting the amplifier right here, so it's kind of silly to run the wires all the way forward just to have them run all the way back. Just screwed in, and then when I wire up the amp, I'm going to leave ends off so that we can attach them to the speakers. He's got to come back and zip tie those up into place, but now that that's done, I have to put this all back together, but I'm going to wait until I get my amplifier mounted. With all the measurement on the amp rack done, getting those angles just right, came up with this shape here. This is going to be the front of the car. This is going to be the back of the car. I notched it so I can get to the gain controls and also leave room for the fan. As you can see, it kind of looks like the drawing. These are a little bit longer than in the drawing, obviously, because the drawing isn't always to scale. I want to get the amplifier mounted in place so that I can put it up into the deck and just do one last test fitting. With ABS, always pre-drill your holes. For this, I used a 3/32. Used 1/2-inch screws. That means there's a little nipple coming out of the end. Sand that flush. I'm only gonna put these 2 screws in for now. Let's get it in the car and see how it fits. That fits perfect. The amplifier isn't touching the box. There's about a 1/4 inch between the bottom of the amp and the box, which is just what I wanted. It's also not touching this metal, about a 1/4 inch away from that. I have to drill holes for rivets to go in place so that I can then screw this up. I'm gonna take the amplifier off to do that. I don't have a big heavy thing above my face as I'm drilling the hole. So for this, we drilled and put in some M5 nutserts. There's gonna be 2 in the back here, and then 4 across the front here. There we go, mounted into place. What I need to do now is put the box back in and make sure that it still fits in. Oh yeah, like a glove. Next step, pull this all back out, get this over to the bench, screw the amplifier down, do all my wiring. To get the wiring to go across, what I'm thinking is we have some zip ties that are like the Christmas tree zip ties. They have the panel clips built into them. I'm thinking I'll use those to go across and down so that I can run my wire forward. That's at least the thought right now. We'll see how it goes, because I need the power side to go up the driver's side and the RCAs and speaker wire to go up the passenger side. The battery is on the driver's side over here, so that will be the easier way to go. Let's head over to the bench. My first problem is the amplifier is backwards. The power needs to go this way, the signal needs to go that way. This has to do a big crisscross action. What that means is I need to kind of work my way up then. The power wire can go up high, the signal wire I want to go down low. First thing I want to look at is the RCA, because that is on the farthest side here. The 4000 series, one of the nice things about it is a nice flat RCA with small heads, meaning this piece here is very narrow. They are directional. It says here source. There's also arrows on this. If that happens to fall off, follow the arrows. On the ends here it says front rear sub. I want to run these along here. That way I can have the speaker wire come out next to them and the sub wire come out this way. Keep this nice and tight up against the amplifier. First thing I want to do is put some heat shrink over these ends so I know what is front, rear, and sub, because this is 6 inches away from it, and by the time I see this, these are going to be all taped up and hard to figure out. This heat shrink fits on here super tight. You don't need a lot of heat in order to shrink it down enough to make it permanent. That's kind of key. You don't want to heat these up too much because this is really thin wire. You don't want to stretch any of the wire inside of it. Now looking at the back side, these zip ties here are all facing into the amplifier. That's because we're going to be moving this way with the zip ties. So we want to make sure this hole stays open because we'll be coming back through this more than likely with these speaker wires. That gets our signal portion of this done. One thing I want to do is grab the bass knob before I forget it. That is going to be coming up this side. I love to forget these. Bass knob is in. I won't forget about it now. While I'm over on this end though, I'm gonna turn on my high pass crossovers, dial them into what looks like 80, turn my gains all the way down. And that's our pre-tune, so that when we turn on the amplifier, it's safe to turn on and it's not going to damage any of the speakers. For the subwire, we're going to run a dual 12 gauge wire. I like to run a separate 12 gauge inside of the loom. It makes it a lot more flexible than if you use a joined 12 gauge. We've put our ferrules on, covered our ends in heat shrink. We'll get it installed in the amplifier. This is where having their long Allen key is very helpful. I always wait until the wires are ran, zip tied in place before I put the ends on, mainly because these bends tend to shrink the wire in different directions, and you want to make sure that at the end here they're the same length. The nice thing about using ferrules on the end here is that they don't like to touch. I mean, you could do this, I suppose, but if they're just like normal like this, they're not inclined to touch one another. And it just gives it a more finished end. Subwire is in and ran. Next, we're gonna move on to our speaker wires. First up is the rears going this way. We're going to run those out like this so they can just go right up to the rear speakers. For the rear speaker wires, because they're gonna be out where you can see them, they're gonna be on their own. I've twisted together some black and purple, green and purple, and then put them in some flexible tubing, put color indicators on the ends. Purple is the passenger rear, green is the driver's rear. That means that this is the left and this is the right. And on this, left is here, right is here. They're going to be backwards. If we wanted them to come out the right direction, it's just colors. We could just flip these RCAs upside down and make right, left, and left, right. Simply by doing this. And now they are correct and we can come out and go the direction we want with these. Visualizing where I want the power wire to come along in here, I think this is going to be the spot for this wire, and then I'll match it on this side and that'll give me enough room to put my other wire right between it. For the front, we twisted together some white and black and gray and black, loomed over the first 12 inches or so. It's going to get integrated in with this wire to go forward. With the speaker wires all in, I have remote turn on left that's going to be coming over here. Once that comes over here, this whole portion of it will be covered in flex loom. But I have my ground that needs to come out as well as my power. I'm going to... I don't know if I'm going to put a riser here or not. I think I should. These are the things that you grapple with as you're trying to put it together. I have the height because this goes up. But first I have to get my wires covered in flex loom. That takes a couple minutes. That's one of the time-consuming things of doing this, is putting on all this braided stuff. So I'll do that, and while I'm doing it, it's typically when I'm thinking about this type of thing. I put a 1/2 inch lifter here to raise the power wire up as it comes out of here and goes along. I'm also switching my drill bit from the 9/64 up to the 5/32. This drill bit will be for a fatter, longer zip tie than the little 4-inch zip ties we use. That's where our first hole will be. Drill this thing out. Power wire zip tied up. Lastly, we have the remote turn on wire. That's going to come across here and be in this area right here. Remote wire has a ferrule, has some braided sleeving over it, just long enough to get it over into this area here. Coming up from behind the power wire, feed it into the hole and tighten it up. All the wires are ran. I can put the top back on this, and it's a good time to do it now. The way this is going to be mounted, we'll never be able to get back to it unless we pull the whole amplifier down, which doesn't sound like fun. We have to blow this area off in here. That is one of the side effects of drilling hundreds of holes, is that these little pieces all get caught up inside of this. That's the last step as far as the wiring goes. The only thing I have left is to cover this wire, this run, which is the RCA, the remote, and the 2 speaker wires with braided loom. The RCA and speaker wire are all loomed up. Everything is covered. The amplifier is now all done and ready to get into the car. As discussed earlier, what I'm gonna do is zip tie these all together and then use these little Christmas tree zip ties to hold the wire up into place in the rear deck. But the only way that'll happen is if I get it into the car. Hey, can you give me a hand? Perfect. Here's the screws. Okay. If you want to get those first 2 in the back there, that would be cool. And I will hold this.
Just don't drop it in my face.
I will not drop it on your face. I'm using both hands. So with the amplifier bolted into place, we have a clear shot of all the gains and crossovers, and that fan, that's that silver spot right there. This will get a ton of air, no issues. Now I need to connect this speaker wire up and run those across, which means I get to crawl back into the trunk. What I want to do is get all the wire ran to this side, and then I'll go to that side. But getting it run forward like this allows me to get my bundle all connected and zip tied into place. Just makes things a little bit easier. With the back seat out and this side panel missing, gives us access to the harness for those factory amplifiers. If you don't want to zip tie them up into the car and you just want to remove them all together, there's 2 harnesses located behind this side, and you can do that. And that's the plan. Zip ties up into place, very similar to the factory that we have all going through here, except these are black instead of white, so they blend in a little better. I'll repeat that on the other side, and then I can hook up these speaker wires here to the speaker, and I can start getting the back of this car back together. Good times. The rear deck is back in, the wires are all ran. Let's take a look. Power wire with the Christmas trees in, like we were showing. The speakers are connected, the other speaker is connected, and our signal wire is also Christmas treed and zip tied up into place. Our sub wire comes out of this back corner here. This is a hard plastic with carpet, so we were able to just drill a hole and have it come out. This area is done. We showed you at the beginning, underneath the hood, we've added in our fuse holder and we've improved it just a tad. Let's take a gander. Fernando came in with a simple 90-degree, or what we call the basic L style fuse. These, as you know, on pop, there's a screw here, so you can easily pull this out with leaving the connector in here and get to your battery. The problem that we had was his grounding. He had this as a chassis ground. It was going right here to this bolt. You know, not the best. We've upgraded that to a 4-gauge ground. These typically don't have the best ground going over to the block either, so we ran an additional 4-gauge over to the block as well, following the factory wiring harness so that nothing happens to the wire. With that in place, he's not gonna have any problems with the new amplifier that he's put in. This system will be more than enough to handle what we've done. This, on the other hand, this would have been bad. Fernando's getting ready to start on the backup camera, and I wanted to talk about pieces that this backup camera comes with. It comes with the tag. This is adjustable. It has a little 3-foot cable here with a small end so you can drill a hole and fit it through. On the end, it also has the ability to mirror, so if we wanted to put it in the front of a car, we can, and then to shut off the trajectory lines. Those are the lines that turn with you as you're going. This end here plugs into this, has the female end on it, has a standard RCA and a power and ground, or should I say an accessory. Then it comes with this night mirror right here. This is a standard RCA, male on one end, female on the other. This plugs into it like this. And then the idea is that you run a wire over to the reverse wire, connect this, and then this runs up behind the radio. The problem with that is the radio has a button to turn on the rear view camera when you're not in reverse. If you would like to use that, then connecting it to the reverse wire for power for the camera is a bad idea. I propose if you're gonna do this, you have to run this anyways. Run a power and ground, something like this wire here, which is essentially the same thing that this has. Connect this to this, so you have an accessory, you have a ground. This will run up behind the radio, and the camera will have power as soon as the car turns on. So whether it be in reverse or the button on the radio, it turns on. Even though these take 12 volts, these are 3-volt cameras. They don't get really hot, they don't absorb a lot of amperage. They've figured this out at this point in the game as far as camera goes. If you still want to use this wire to connect out to the reverse wire and then run that up to the purple-white wire behind the radio, or whatever color yours is, you can. However, because we like to do things that match, and so if anyone else goes in the car or if we approach it later, we will run a purple 18 gauge wire to our reverse lights. If the car doesn't have a smart harness, which this one is too old and doesn't, that usually makes the most sense. Sometimes you can grab it in a kick panel or a wiring harness to the rear. It's never in the fuse box. Even though there might be a fuse there for it, it's typically not the trigger wire you're looking for. The easiest place is at the light, and since you are going to be running this cable, what's the difference between whether you run 1 wire or 3 wires? Backup camera is in place. We can adjust this once we get it all set, but what I wanted to show you is the trunk lid here. Here's our connection. We've put it in a location that is easy enough to get to. You don't want it to be somewhere over in this area or through a grommet or something like that. Keep it close to the camera in a place that is going to be out of the way. The nice thing about this is obviously it has these grooves, makes it easy to hide. Fernando went and fixed this mess that we were talking about earlier, pulled off all the original loom and the tape that was on it before. You have to keep that plastic 90 that's right here, tape that back into place. He went with several layers of tape now. They just put one, that's why it fails. You have to keep this little connector here, the Christmas tree that holds this in, and that will bring you this loop. So now when the trunk closes, as you can see, it goes into the car and it will clear that gasket. Now we're going to tap into the reverse light, and for that we'll need a digital multimeter. Set it to volts DC, which is the V with the dashes and the line above it. Connect your black test lead to ground. Your red test lead is going to go to the wire you think is your backup camera because you're testing for positive. In a Ford, typically the reverse trigger is a black-pink wire. This one right here. So we've gone to our plug. Fernando will now put it in reverse and we'll see if it lights up. And we have reverse voltage. The other thing you want to make sure is that your reverse light is coming on, because not all cars does the reverse light come on when the engine isn't running. That's something you have to test. So you're like, oh, it's this wire and I want to make sure it's this wire, and then you put it in reverse and you don't get a reading. We are getting voltage. Take it out of reverse and it goes away. That's the wire we need to tap into and run forward with the rest of our wires. The 957XR. For those of you guys that are familiar with Kenwood Exelon is the higher end brand of Kenwood. You can typically only get it in specialty retailers. A couple years ago, they decided to come out with a higher end version of Kenwood Exelon, and those are called the XRs. XRs have better screens, the best components they could possibly find to put in the audio section. These are the best of the best with honors, thank you sir, as far as Kenwood is concerned. It's called the Reference Series. Let's open this one up and see what comes in the box. One of the things I really like about Kenwood is they put 2 USBs on the back of the radio, and they give you 2 USB extensions. Novel idea. Comes with a standard powering harness. On this, you have 3 extended wires. One is the reverse trigger, which is a purple-white. The second is a light green emergency brake wire. This needs to see a ground. We'll leave it at that. And then you have this pink wire, which is the signal sense wire for the speed sense or transmission pulse. This has to do with CarPlay and Android Auto as far as the accuracy is concerned. As long as the GPS antenna has a good signal, then this does not need to be hooked up. However, if your car does have a VSS wire, which would usually be something that has a smart harness, definitely hook it up. In this car, there's no VSS, it will not be hooked up. You also have your standard wire configurations here, your 8 speaker wires as pairs, white, gray, green, purple. Solids are positive, the stripes are negative. It has 2 weird green colored that say cam plus, cam negative. These are for the Kenwood camera that has a DSP built into it for different camera options. You have a blue with a yellow stripe. It has this little flag on it. The reason why they do that is to differentiate it from the blue and the blue white. They all have flags on them. They do that so that you can see what they are. The blue is the power antenna or amplified antenna turn on. The blue white is the remote turn on for your amplifier. And the light blue yellow is for steering wheel controls. Do not confuse these. None of these wires should be twisted together and connected. Okay, that's important because we've seen people that take all these, they twist them together and they hook them up to something. Do not do that. Each one of these goes to one thing specifically and should only be hooked up that way. You have a yellow constant 12 volts, a red accessory, an orange-white illumination, so the radio display dims when you turn on the lights, and then a black ground. All the wiring is on the main harness for this particular Kenwood. Kenwood does make a couple different size connectors. If you're looking to upgrade, make sure you check yours. You get the hands-free microphone, the GPS antenna we just mentioned. Even though this does not have GPS built into it, it is for CarPlay and Android Auto, so that if your phone is in your pocket, it will use this antenna instead of trying to use your phone, because this has wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. You might just be leaving your phone in your pocket or in your purse, your bag, or wherever it is, maybe down low in the door panel. So you still need access to the sky, and this provides it. Comes with a bag of screws. This particular radio uses machine screws, not coarse screws. Most kits come with coarse screws. Don't use those, use the screws that it comes with. It comes with a trim ring for around the radio if you're going to be doing some form of a DIN or center console mount. Instruction manual with extraction keys because this one comes with a cage. This is the cage here. If you are going to be using the cage, something to remember is that, see these 2 indentions right here? This makes this cage about a ½ inch bigger than this radio. Even though this is like 4 inches, this is 4.5 inches. Keep that in mind when you're designing this. This doesn't slide into a perfect double DIN. It's bigger. If you recall me saying this is a mechaless unit, meaning there's no CD, DVD built into it, but it's still a full chassis. The reason for that is because on the XR reference series radios, they all have the same circuit board. They just swap in parts. There's 3 versions of this radio. One with a CD, DVD, and a GPS. One with no GPS, just CD, DVD. And then this one here where they've taken both of those things out. But this bottom circuit board where all the nice electronics are needs to have that. The one thing you'll notice about this radio though is that it's heavy. This is a heavy radio. Unlike most radios that you're going to pick up nowadays, this has that 1990s weight to it that you're used to when you pick up a double DIN, because it has so much stuff jammed into it to make it sound good. On the back side of the unit, it has a bunch of things happening. You see immediately the 4 yellow connectors. One is for third camera view, one is for video out, one is for front camera or dash cam. Kenwood makes a dash cam that can integrate into this. And then the last is for reverse camera. This is for the 4th camera input. Plugs into your AV in right here, and now you can do your 4 cameras. Your GPS antenna plugs in here. Your hands-free microphone plugs in. Your FM antenna, this has HD radio. AV output is a aux connector. This is not an input, this is an output. This is the only input on the radio. Your 6-channel 5-volt preamp output. It goes sub, front, rear. Keep that in mind. Front is in the middle, unlike everyone else. Your main power plug. Your dash cam input is white. Your RR connection is the black connector over here with the little aux jack connector here. The reason why it has this is for some systems you have backup cameras and you have factory entertainment systems that come over this connector. It needs to be able to plug in. You have your 2 USBs, a gray and a white. Sirius XM will plug in here. On the front of the radio, the hard buttons that he was after were volume up and down here, attenuation, in mute, the home button or press and hold for power, menu, which will bring down the drop down menu to control it, and then over here is camera. This will allow you to activate that camera when the car is not in reverse, and that way you can also switch between however many cameras you connect to it. If you press and hold it, it'll switch between camera angles. This button, if you press and hold it, is push for talk. And the menu button, if you press and hold that, is to turn the display off. So some of the buttons do have multifunction. Now it does look like this screen would move. And actually it has the full motorization built into it, and it goes to this thing here in the back that looks like it should take an SD card, but it doesn't. It's a solid piece of plastic in there. Reason why this motor is here is so that the radio will tilt for you. That means if it's sitting like this in your dash and you would like it to do that so you can see it better, it will do that. It's one of the only Mechaless radios that has that capability. So we know everything there is to know about this radio. Let's get it into the dash kit. Next we have the wiring harness. Looks like they covered it in some of this cool, this is loom, but it's like split loom, but braided. It's neat stuff. This car had the factory subwoofers in it, as we know, and this is the plug that powered them. This is a 12 to 5 volt converter. Ford will take 12 volts on remote turn on. However, it will give a pop when it turns on because of that inrush of current. You can buy an adapter now, such as a volt 3 to 9, that will solve that. It has a 5 volt switch on it. You put it on that, and that'll stop this from popping. Remove the Pioneer harness because we're not going to be using that, and we have what's left is the Ford harness. For me, I like to remove any wiring that isn't pertaining to this particular install. It's more of just a pet peeve than anything. For this install, we will not be using the rear speaker wires because we ran our own. The other nice thing about this is that if you need the wiring for something else in the harness, you now have extra pins. This also does not have a powered antenna. This is a nice feature that they always put this blue. Some of them have a blue and a blue with white. The reason why this is cool, some Fords with steering wheel controls, it's a one-wire steering wheel control wire, and they don't pin this harness for some reason. You can pull the amplified antenna output out if the car doesn't have one, which you can easily check by plugging it in and see if the wire's on the other side, and use this to repin for the steering wheel controls. Put our lock back in place. Now we have a much more usable harness. That leaves us with the 2 front speaker wires, the red accessory, orange illumination, black ground, and yellow 12 volts. One thing I like to do is loop a remote turn on wire in with these, and then over to here like this. The reason why I do that is because my speaker wires are ran with my remote turn on. They're in a bundle all taped up. I have all 5 of these wires right here to connect, and it just gives it this much cleaner look than having a random wire that just kind of comes over like this and connects. I'll get this all soldered up and we'll take a look at it. And this is what we end up with when we're done. All the wires we're not using, we tape up in a bundle, cap off the ends. Definitely have to cap off the ends. You don't want those speaker wires anywhere where they can touch anything. We put a big thing of shrink wrap over it to hold it all together. Here are the wires that are going to go off to our backup camera. We have the reverse trigger in. There is a way to do this. These here are outputs. This here is an input. What that means is that the 12 volts from the reverse light is coming into this. That needs to have an insulated connector on it. The power and the ground are outputs here. That means that the insulated connector needs to be on it on this side. You end up with a female here and a male here. Then the connectors just go back over the end. On this end, here's our remote and our speaker wires. So this is ready to be put into the car now. We're back at the dash where we started. Our plug is here. Fernando ran his backup wires, same connectors. We have the insulated female for the reverse, and we have the non-insulated on his side, power and ground, which will plug into our female insulated. It's a nice simple connection there. Our speaker wires and a remote turn on are up front along with our RCAs. Here's the plan. This is where it gets kind of fun. Because the amplifier is already up there and I don't have to unscrew all the speaker wires from there, we're going to hook up the remote turn on and we're going to do the DD1 up here. And we'll do it in the back and we'll do it at the sub. That way we can get the gain set before we put all this back together. It's the best idea I could come up with because I don't want to pull that amp back down. So I just need to solder the remote turn on wire together and grab the radio. You just have to remember, even though I told you guys that it goes sub, front, rear. Everything is plugged into the radio. Turn it on. The rear speakers are hooked up, so we should get some audio from there. Little tip, as excited as you are to test the radio and see what's going on, always just go through the setup. This has the tilt screen on it. We have sound coming out of the rear. Perfect. Let's move on to the DD1 test. For this, we're going to be using the Educar Test and Tune app. It has a bunch of test tones here that we can play with. One of them is 1000K. 0 dB. We have our DD1 hooked up to the output of the front speaker, connected to ground. Connected to ground. Let's start turning up the volume. We have signal, 1K detected. We're turned all the way up with no distortion, just like a Kenwood. We're gonna switch to the -5 dB. I'm gonna head to the back and start turning the gain up, and Fernando's gonna tell me when the distortion light comes on.
All right, distortion, go down, go up a little bit, down, up a hair, down a hair, right there.
The front's done. I'm gonna move to the rear and do the rear speakers the same way. Test lead connected to ground. DD1 has a signal. Start turning it up. There we go. Bad. Start turning it down. Gone, get it right. There you go. Rear speaker's good. Switch it to 40 hertz. So we have 40 hertz playing. Now I have my bass boost up on the amplifier where I want it. Start turning up my gain. There we go. Distortion, turn it down. Find that happy spot. Right. Right there. All right, gains are set. Fernando, turn the radio back down. Make sure you turn the radio all the way down before you turn it off. You don't want to get back in the car, have everything. Yeah, it's happened. I can connect these rear speaker wires back up, and then I'm gonna head up front and finish getting those speaker wires connected there so we can start doing some more testing.
And the other guys combined.
Let's make sure we have sound on all our speakers. For that, we'll use the Test and Tune app again, and we'll switch over to pink noise and select mono. Everything is making sound. We'll go into the audio menu and we'll check our balance and fader. One of the cool things about the Kenwood is that no matter where you have your bass and treble, there is a center button here that'll put it back in the center for you. With all the speakers playing and in the right spots, we're gonna move on to the polarity pop test. This test is gonna allow us to see what direction the speakers are moving in. To test that, we're gonna be using the Sheffield Labs My Disc polarity pop. All the speakers are moving in the direction we want them to. That's key. One other thing, like in this, you gotta get to the back speaker. If you can't get to these rear speakers, because let's say, it's too far or whatever, and you can get to the bottom side of the speakers, you can always do it there. If we go to the bottom side of the speakers, it'll just pop the opposite. So you get red, red, green instead of green, green, red. As long as you're rolling in that direction, the lines will stay on. But they're not accurate to the car, it's just a nice guideline. We call them faux lines. Now that finishes up our testing. The last thing on this is to sit in the car and just take a listen, tweak the EQ a little bit. This one does not have a DSP, so we don't need to go and do that. It's just old school jam time. Now, even though it's just a radio, no DSP, the radio has an EQ, so there's no reason not to take advantage of that and do a little bit of tweaking, do the best that we can with what we got, and, make it sound as good, which is what we're doing. Cool features about the Kenwood is if you do find a setting that you really love, it has a audio memory. So when you're here in the radio, hit this and you can audio setup memory. Say yes. If you want, you can even lock it. That allows you to recall or clear whatever it is you're doing. All right, Fernando, I'm done.
Awesome.
You done?
Yes.
Want to hear it?
Yeah.
While he's getting ready to sit in the car, I think it's just time to end the show. Thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this classic Mustang install. If you have one like this, well, now you know how to do it. Otherwise, just bring it to us and let us do it.
That's right.
Fernando, end the show.
Until the next one, guys.
You guys have a good night as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Oh, you know what? I didn't show you the subwoofer.
Oh, you should.
I know, right? Could you pop the truck for me? Sorry. It fits in there nice, up out of the way, plenty of room. All right, now the show's over. See ya.